Hi, my name is Chris Larson. I'm a master's student in computer science at Virginia Tech, and this is my guide on how to crack a WPA2 wireless network. So cracking a wireless network is defeating the security system in place for a wireless local area network, also known as a LAN, and the most common wireless LAN is a Wi-Fi network. Specifically, this attack exposes the security vulnerabilities that are exploited in a wireless LAN, including poor configuration and weak security protocols. In this presentation, we'll be cracking a Wi-Fi router that uses a WPA WPA2 security protocol, which is a type of encryption used to secure the vast majority of Wi-Fi networks today. So cracking the passwords for WPA2 networks has been roughly the same for a while now, but this attack is a newer version that's particularly dangerous because it requires less interaction than the previous technique. And the big difference is that now we're able to break into the target access point with no one connected. And we do this by using an RSNIE, which stands for a Robust Security Network Information Element, which is used on a single EAPOL frame. But I'll get into all this later. The original way of cracking a WPA2 password was by temporarily disconnecting a connected device from the targeted access point in order to record their handshake with it. A handshake is the first four messages of the encryption connection process between a user and the Wi-Fi access point. The drawback of this older method is even despite a network having a weak password that could be easy to break, if there isn't a device to disconnect briefly to capture the handshake, then there's no possible way to crack it. This older tactic is also noisy and it could cause a few legal troubles, since in order to send packets to disconnect the authorized user, this type of interference is technically a denial of service attack, and you're essentially jamming their network even if you're doing it only momentarily. And this can get you in trouble, especially because you become pretty easily detectable while sending these packets. This new attack was discovered accidentally while looking for new ways to attack the WPA3 security standard that was released a couple years ago, but that is a much more difficult to attack than the WPA2, and that's because it uses a modern key .establishment protocol called simultaneous authentication of equals. This attack for the WPA2 network is assumed to work on all 802.11 IPQR networks with roaming functions enabled, so this means most modern routers. To run this attack, you'll need a Debian-based version of Linux, and so for this demo, I'll be running Kali Linux, and for testing purposes, you'll need to access your own wireless network adapter that supports monitor mode and packet injection. We'll also be using two tools, one called HCX Tools, which is used to capture the PMK IDs coming from the local network, and we'll also use Hashcat, which is a password recovery tool, and then we'll use a list of common Wi-Fi passwords that we get from GitHub. A limitation of using this list, however, is that the decryption list might not actually contain the password we're looking for, even though it could take hours to go through. Another challenge of using these tools is that not every network is vulnerable to this attack. Some manufacturers add optional fields that mess with the way this technique works, and other ones don't even include an element with the PMK ID, so this technique is kind of finicky. So first we're going to download the HCX dump tool from this Git repository, which will allow us to capture packets from WLAN devices. So now we're going to go into the directory we just installed, and we're going to look at the files in there, and then we'll type make and make install to download the dependencies. Now let's install HCX Tools, which will let us convert the packets we capture for use with a password recovery tool like John the Ripper or Hashcat. So since this version of Linux I'm using comes with the option to pre-download Hashcat, we just have to check to make sure the version currently downloaded is compatible with this attack, and that version is 4.2 or higher. So now we're going to put our wireless adapter into monitor mode. So let's type ifconfig to get a list of the adapters. However, mine didn't show up, so you can also type IPA, and now we can see that the adapter that we're going to use is called WLAN1. Now let's type the airmon command in order to set it into monitor mode. Now call the HCX dump tool we downloaded earlier to collect the packets coming from this access point. The parameters are going to be -i to specify the interface we're using, the file name to save to with -o, and the channel to scan with -c. We're also going to use a filter list to only attack a specific target. Once this command collects for a while, we're going to press Ctrl+C to end the attack, and now we have a PCA PNG file with all the PMK IDs to run a brute force on. With this file, we're going to use the HCX cap tool to convert it to a file type compatible with Hashcat, with a few commands to help Hashcat understand it, along with the -z command naming the file to convert to, and then having the file name that we're converting at the end. Here we see we were able to capture 2 PMK IDs from the EAPOL PMK ID section that we were sniffing for, and it converted it to our 16800 file for Hashcat. Now we'll use Hashcat to recover the password from the file we just created, with the name of the 16800 file here being called hotspotcap, and the password dictionary file called darkcode.txt, which I just got off GitHub, which was sourced from multiple leaks with all the duplicates removed, so then we can check against it. So now to check the status of Hashcat while it's running, we can just press S on our keyboard, and we can see we've recovered 0 of the 2 PMK IDs we got earlier, with an estimated time to run through my list at 11 hours and 54 minutes. But as I keep refreshing, it keeps going up. So after running this overnight, as you can see, I wasn't able to crack my Wi-Fi password, which is good for me, and that's pretty common today since the default passwords for many personal access points is pretty strong. But it's also important to note that since a lot of people will change their password to make it easier to share with guests and friends at their home, it opens up the conversation on bigger lessons we can learn from this attack. This attack in particular is known as an offline attack, making it much easier to brute force their way into a successful breach. While this attack methodology is specific to WPA, WPA2 protocols, cracking using a password dictionary brute force attack can be used for websites as well. For example, with Gmail, after a certain amount of attempts at guessing the password, the attacker is locked out for some time. But some sites in the past haven't done this, like the Apple iCloud attack in 2014. With an infinite number of password combinations, it could take a long time to actually crack a password, but you'd be surprised how many people default to weak passwords. Even with moderate passwords, attackers can utilize more hardware power through cloud computing, like using an Amazon S3 service, so just throw everything in a brute force attack, and this can speed up the number of guesses to millions per second. Once someone has access to your network, they can read your data just like a public network at coffee shops or malls. This could give them access to information you don't want getting out, like email or bank accounts, and cracking the WPA2 password is really just the beginning of a slippery slope for other security attacks. The best defense to this attack is, as usual, a good long password. With the right password, even with the above methods, it could take years or even longer to crack it. While when your password is literally just password, it'll be cracked in less than a single second. The recommended length is about 20 characters, but definitely at least 8 at the bare minimum. Another good technique is to also use capital lowercase numbers and special characters in combination, which will force the recovery tool to go through as many permutations as possible. Changing your password every 6 months or to a year could be a good idea, especially for high interest targets like cloud services where you keep your data or bank accounts. Some sites like Microsoft.com even have security logs where you can see failed attempts to log into your account, and sending an email to sites you no longer use for a full deletion of your data is a good idea, since if your information from that site is ever leaked, it can be uploaded where other attackers can use your associated email and password to try it on other sites. Because of the continued use of WPA2, these attacks are still a threat. The newer version, WPA3, was introduced in the summer of 2018 and addresses many of the shortcomings of the WPA protocol, like greater protection for simple passwords, individualized encryption for networks, and widespread encryption for enterprise networks where it's used by many individuals. Adoption of the WPA3 has been slow, however, since certification from the Wi-Fi Alliance hasn't required WPA3 until just this year, and then there's still no guarantee that users will upgrade for quite some time. The main thing I want you to have learned from this video is how from just your Wi-Fi password being cracked, it could lead for all your digital data being exposed. The best precautions you can take are either upgrading to a WPA3 access point, or the easier of the two, using a very, very secure password. Anyways, thanks for watching, and hope you have a good one.